Hi, I'm Anthony Rapp, and you're at Comics Online.
Anthony, thank you so much for sharing your time with me.
Sure.
We're celebrating everything Star Trek in Chicago this weekend. We're so excited to continue talking to all of your castmates and the crew from all the different series. So excited to celebrate Star Trek Discovery as part of that.
Thank you.
I would love to just start with, what is your earliest memory of Star Trek?
My earliest memory is being a latchkey kid. My mom was a single mother nurse coming home from school, and I don't remember if it was WGN, because I grew up outside Chicago in Joliet, or what channel it was on, but Star Trek reruns after school, watching those as part of whatever I watched that. I watched Planet of the Apes. These are some of the memories I have. Land of the Lost. Maybe that was Saturday morning, but anyway, and really being especially drawn to Spock, especially Leonard Nimoy. So I have a very early childhood impression of him and just being fascinated by his performance and his character. And then I remember going to see the first 3 movies in the movie theaters when I was, I think the motion picture was in '79, I think, right? So I was probably 7 or 8 when that came out. And then I did see the first 3 in the movie theaters. I remember that very vividly. And again, always especially drawn to Leonard Nimoy.
Well, with Star Trek Discovery, you guys had just obviously finished the 5-season run, an incredible ending to the series as well.
Thank you.
I would love to hear, just stepping onto the bridge for the first time. What was that like?
It was mind-blowing, but my mind had been blown repeatedly before that point, because as a nerd growing up and seeing things like Star Trek and Star Wars and comic books and superhero things, I was always a fan of them, but I really never imagined that I would be in them myself. I never was like, oh, I'm going to do that someday. It just seemed like that was going to happen over there. I was always going to enjoy it. So when I first got the email that's how I heard about it. I got an email before going to bed one night that I just happened to check my phone, and it was from my agent saying, would you be interested in being a part of the new Star Trek series? I'm like, are you kidding me? So that was the first, hit myself in the head with a comic falling out of outer space. And then before I stepped on the bridge, we did a photo shoot. And so I hadn't even done a scene yet as my character, and they're, doing a photo shoot with us. So I get into uniform for the first time. They hand me a phaser. They hand me a tricorder, and I'm like, in a Delta. That was mind blowing. So the stepping on the bridge was yet another of all of these incredibly surprising and life-changing moments, and I was absolutely mindful that I'm a part of something that was going to change my life forever.
Well, I also want to say, as far as milestones, Star Trek has always pushed boundaries and making sure that inclusion is very prevalent. I think representation in Star Trek is a very important piece, but getting to see your character's evolution and more so just his found family, I think was a wonderful depiction within the world of Trek.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with you.
I would love to hear, just as far as the evolution with Paul. Was this the character as envisioned originally when he was suggested to you when you were auditioning? How did he evolve behind the scenes as you got to put your mark on the character?
Well, I remember my early conversation. I was told by the showrunners that he was going to go through some tough things with Hugh, but I was never interested in knowing the secrets before they happened, because when you're doing a long story like this, knowing the outcome doesn't necessarily help in the moment, because Paul didn't know the outcome. So I didn't want to know the details. So he's going to go through some intense things with Hugh. So I was like, okay, that's cool. And I connected very strongly in the early material with Paul's ideals being challenged by he's so idealistic. He's so committed to his work and in believing in the power of science to make the world a better place, to advance humanity, to answer the mysteries, unlock the mysteries of the universe. And the fact that his work was being used for militaristic ends was really upsetting, that he'd been conscripted to do that. That resonated with me very powerfully. So I also realized that a lot of, he's definitely got a curmudgeonly side, and he has incredibly high standards and is really driven. So, but that was exacerbated by the circumstances that he found himself in. So the edginess I really liked. I thought it was really fun to play, and it also was understandable to me and human. It wasn't just that he's a dick. It's that he was like really in an untenable situation. And it was also always really nicely offset by his relationship with Hugh, that you could see that in that relationship, he's really like softened and open-hearted with Hugh, and really trying to figure out how to navigate the human heart. So I was really happy then that because of getting through the darkness of season 1 and what followed, that Paul did, the softer sides got to show more and more, but that he also didn't lose his like incredibly high standards and his he didn't lose his edge, but it was balanced out more with what he did go through with Hugh and how that helped him evolve. And then, of course, with Blue coming into the picture and becoming a surrogate father to them, that was very meaningful. So yeah, I realized I just gave you a super long answer.
It's a great answer.
But it's like there's a lot there. I always felt so grateful that I had like what I think of as like a full meal to devour with the material I was given. Like I was always given so much wonderfully rich stuff to chew on.
One of the pieces I loved about the final season was Paul's desire to figure out how he was going to be remembered, to make his mark. Yeah. And I mean, I think it resonates with a lot of us, just how are we going to be remembered, and the journey, the quest that the crew of the Discovery went on was just so poignant. But I think it was a powerful end to a wonderful series.
Yeah, I agree with you, and thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, and I think it's also understandable, like what he was working on was absolutely revolutionary and life-changing, and it was also, unfortunately, it required that human element. And as we discovered it early in season 1, when it had to do like however many jumps it was that episode, it's untenable for a human being to be required to be used in that way. So if that couldn't be solved, then yeah, the technology was limited.
I love the behind the scenes stories and just hearing just how things are made. I was a film major in college, so the production piece is always interesting to me. When you guys made the time jump within the series, how did that come across from a production perspective? Did things change dramatically on set as far as the aesthetics, as far as the pieces that you got to work with? Like, what was that process like making that change?
You mean in the most recent season when we did this
when you
one
went
where
from
we
season
went
2 to season 3?
Oh, that time
you had
jump.
a
Sorry,
big time
yeah,
jump.
that time jump. Yeah, there were a lot of like cosmetic things that happened on the set, but it also, it was always the same bones of the set, and then of course we had new uniforms. Yeah, I mean, I think things kept getting refined. And of course, another big change that happened from a tech perspective was the holograms that we then used. So we were then miming more, as opposed to like using the practical tricorder. We're using the hollow tricorder. So that just was like a little different technically. It was a little different technically for us as actors to interact with nothing as opposed to something. But yeah, basically, we always had so much practical stuff on our sets that when we're on the bridge, when we're in engineering, all that stuff is really there except for the hollow screens. Those are the only things that were put in visual effects afterwards, pretty much for the most part. And then the big leap was the AR wall, which I think was season 4, if I remember correct. Forgive me for not remembering these details exactly, but I believe season 4 when we introduced the AR wall technology, which is also really impressive. But I wasn't on that set. I was only on that set a couple times because I was almost always in engineering where there's no AR wall. Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes from this last season was the time bug episode. I loved how you guys played with expectations with that. But I just wanted to share that a lot of great moments came from that one in particular.
Thank you. That was a really fun one for me in particular. You know, I had a really fun material in that, but and Lee Rose, our director of that episode, she'd done I think at least one episode every season, including this one, and she's a blast to work with. Very, very fun, really efficient, really great with us. And one of the reasons I also really loved that episode was I got to spend a lot of time with Callum, and he was such a great new addition to our cast. And one of the many reasons that I'm sad that the show didn't get to continue past season 5 was that I was looking forward to spending more time with him in season 6, because he was just such a fantastic, new, fresh he brought such a new, fresh dynamic into our family, and you know, really represented to me the way that the Discovery family can help someone like Rennie. Sorry, that's his last name. Rayner, soften and become more open-hearted, and that's sort of the whole ethos of the show. I think is that.
I'd like to pivot to your career for a moment. I love hearing, how did you get started in acting? I know, Adventures in Babysitting and Rent has been, some of your highlights.
Sure.
But what brought you into the world of acting in general?
Well, so I mentioned that my mom was a single mother nurse. She got a job at a summer camp in northeastern Pennsylvania, and my brother, sister, and I attended the camp while she worked there. And while I was at that camp when I was 6 years old, I auditioned for the musical, and I got cast, and the bug bit me. And I went back home. We went back the next summer, did 2 more shows. When I went back home to Joliet, Illinois, where I'm from, started doing community theater. And then there was a community theater director who encouraged my mom to bring me to Chicago to try to look for professional work, because he thought that I would probably be able to work. And he was right. And so it was all just very, I don't know, happenstance in a certain respect. It wasn't like planned. It was through a lot of encouragement, and my mom was, I don't know, now that I'm a father myself, just starting to look at, my kids are very young, but understanding trying to make all these things happen for your kids on a daily basis, their involvement, their activities, is going to be an interesting adventure. That she was able to do that while working, while raising my brother and sister, to make these things possible for me, feels like a miracle.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us, and I hope, and not asking for any spoilers, but I hope that Paul's story gets to continue with the Starfleet Academy series as it spins out of Discovery. So
thank you. I hope so too.